Greetings, everyone. This is Virtuous Roots, where we reclaim virtue to bring into our home and yours. And I'm Thomas McCuddy.
I'm Thomas Quackenbush.
I'm Nick Wiegand. And the conversation we're going to focus on today is the idea of tangible habits with gratitude. So there's many times when I think we ourselves feel like we're gracious or we have gratitude towards someone or towards God, but there's no actual way that we show it. And so I want to kind of like begin with what is gratitude in essence before we even talk about the habits that go along with it. But what is gratitude?
So, gratitude is going to be a subset of justice that we, in a sense, owe people thankfulness. We owe them that gratitude. That when somebody does something for you, there is some expression, some way of expressing that you have that thankfulness. And there is, again, it's one of those, we talk about justice, you give what is due, and it's not due the way that wages are due. There's not a strict justice that's there, but it's more of it's kind of this loose understanding, and cultures express it differently. So that's why there might be different ways of showing their gratitude. And depending upon the culture, there might be different levels of expectations, what would be appropriate. But I think this is why prudence comes into being the kind of person. This is why I emphasize that word habit, that it's not just about let's have techniques of showing gratitude, or even when you have children particularly, and you tell them, hey, say thank you, like thank you. Okay, they've shown gratitude in a sense, but there's no habit there. It's not
Right.
coming from a place of practice where they're just not genuine about it. So I think that's why most of us have a sense of what this is, but I would dare say few of us have the kind of habit and the kind of virtue that it comes out naturally and easily. Sometimes I have to find myself reminding myself, I need to express that Thanksgiving. I need to do that.
Yeah.
It doesn't just, it's not as natural. And that's what makes it the virtue, that it happens quickly, easily, and with joy.
And I think about one of the ways I think, especially our gratitude towards God, is acknowledgement of grace received. It's like looking back and acknowledging God has graced you with whatever in your life, and you can look back on that and then with like almost spontaneously, erupt in your prayer life with thanksgiving towards God, recognizing what he has done in your life. Obviously, that can also pertain to people in your life as well. I mean, I think it begins by expressing it to God, who gives all good things, including people that are in your life, and also recognizing when people, that are like did something nice, or they're being acting kind to you, or whatever, or actually, or showing God's love through an action. Your response should be your heart being filled with gratitude towards that person, and allowing them to know. You don't have to be gratuitous with your Thanksgiving, where you just thank them for every little thing, but having that contemplative heart and really thinking back and recognizing what has happened in your life, that grace that has abounded and was given to you, and you're like, wow, I'm really thankful for this. I'm really thankful for the way God has orchestrated my life, or whatever.
So on the tail end of that, I'm going to read Psalm 100, verses 4 through 5 in the ESV. Reads, enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him. Bless his name. For the Lord is good. His steadfast love endures forever, and his faithfulness to all generations. I think one of the things that you had said, you rolled into the gratitude that we should have towards God, and then you rolled into then how that extends to people. I feel that the most because I think gratitude was something I was lacking. And I think it was really, it was this idea of I deserve things. So if you feel as if you deserve things and you've earned it or whatever, then it's really hard to have any gratitude for what somebody has given to you. Like you had talked about wages. Most people don't feel gratitude towards their work when they pay them their wages, because they feel they've earned it through their work, right? So it's not like, hey, thank you so much, boss, for this check. Not a lot of people say that. They just, if that check is 3 minutes late, where's my money,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it began with me through understanding that I reflected on who God was and that it was all His, and anything I have is because He's allowed it.
Yes.
Because everything is His in the first place. He's just allowing me to be a steward of it.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as that transition in my heart and my brain happened, I was grateful for everything.
Yes.
And you said you don't have to be gratuitous, and I think you were talking towards people
Yep.
with your thanks, but I'm pretty gratuitous
Yeah,
when I talk
think
to
when
God.
it comes to God,
I-
you can't thank Him enough. Yeah.
Right. And so I don't think there's that limit.
Yep.
When that happened, then I started loving people and appreciating the things
Mhm.
that they'd done for me. I think the first step here is to being gracious for what God has given us.
Absolutely.
And I think that's why, is what I think about this as a virtue. One of the things we've found challenging in our home is like when we're sitting down and we're going to say, we're going to pray before the meal, and the whole point is we're giving thanks, and it's what we ought to do. But it can quickly become the kind of routine where it now become more of a tradition, a rite. It falls away from the experience and from the heart of me giving this to God, versus this becomes our custom. This
Right.
becomes our routine. And so it's no longer a genuine habit of virtue. It's just a habit of like training, almost like the Pavlov's dog, where you have this, well, it's a meal, so it's prayer time. So we say a prayer. And I almost picture, sometimes our attitudes when we're sitting around before a meal might be the equivalent of thank you, like when we say to God.
Sure.
And
Especially if it's that prayer that the same words every single time.
and you just get into an unthinking pattern, which
Yep.
again, all virtues must require this sense of knowing what is good and pursuing it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why when we begin to show and perform, I think maybe the best word, we perform these acts of gratitude, but we do it without the engaging of the mind and the heart. We've lost that true habit. It's just become the routine or a reaction,
Right.
instead of this giving of the way that, like, I forget what I had done with the boys, but I had done something for them, and I remember some of them were just so thankful. They just go, thank you so much for doing this. And, it's not something that it was something special. So it's not that every single meal we just sit down and we're just, oh Lord, thank you so much. There is an element of genuine desire and genuine, like, again, it's almost this sense, how do we make sure that we retain and we live in that place of gratitude? Because I think, at least my life, I can speak for myself, I feel like my life is diminished when I'm not living in that sense of gratitude
Sure.
and thankfulness
Absolutely.
to the Lord.
Oh
Yeah.
man, it's terrible, and I think that we can take a blessing without the attitude of, I'm gonna say the cheesy line, the attitude of gratitude. I mean, but it's this idea that without having that kind of disposition, or you're showing gratitude to God for all the things He has given you. There's so many times, like, you have a house that He's provided, and that house starts to have maintenance issues, and you can start looking at that house that has been given, and you recognize it's ultimately from God. Now you're looking at that blessing that He's given you, and you're starting to think of it as a curse. How quickly do we do that with things in our lives, that when they become difficult, or when things break, or whatever happens, without we forget so quickly that grace that God has given us, and the amazing gifts that He has provided for us, so that we can have a life and live comfortably. It's pretty amazing that we're so fortunate in our lives to have what we have.
The Israelites with the manna, and they're
Yep.
like, oh, it's kind of bland.
Yeah.
And every day they're supernaturally being given
Yeah,
food
And
that they gather on
it's
their
so-
front lawn.
In the
So-
desert, right? Yeah.
so quick are we to get callous towards God's grace. We're so quick just to kind of allow, because it's almost like you were saying earlier, like we get kind of used to it. We're like, it's owed to me, and we start getting that sort of attitude. When we have that attitude, that's a pretty bad place to be.
I can always tell it in my prayer life. And being a pastor, I pray out loud more than, probably most people do, but I can always tell it in my prayer life when I'm getting a little, too big for my britches, maybe a little less gratitude,
Mm-hmm.
versus when I'm absolutely just in awe and truly thankful
Yep.
for what He's given me. there will be times that we sit down and eat, and I will open the prayer and I will finish, and someone in my family will be like, and please bless the food, because I was just like, thank you God for this and this and this and this, and I will completely forget
The whole,
to ask God, to bless the food,
I've
because
done that. Yeah.
I'm just I'm just kind of so overwhelmed with what He's given me and all the blessings in my life. But I compare those moments to the moments when it's just like, thank you for this meal, I appreciate it, amen. And there's nothing else said. And I know that was just because we were talking about the food, but my entire prayer life kind of is that same way. Is I can tell when I'm less grateful for what He's given me by what I'm praying for and what I'm thankful for, and then it naturally then goes towards the people around me.
Exactly.
I think those vices of self-interest and self-centeredness, they are these natural drifts in our soul. And that's why if we're not intentionally cultivating these things, and again, intentionally remembering, we do become overly familiar. We do become these kind of people where all of a sudden it's just a box to check instead of from the experience, or, we feel like we've got better things to do. And I think about when my Filipino friends helped me understand this, because Asian cultures tend to be much more relational than American cultures. Okay, and I learned this. My first international trips were over into like China and the Philippines, and I quickly understood why they viewed Americans as rude.
Sure,
'Cause,
absolutely.
we're very direct, and I quickly figured out that like they are not direct, and they were tolerant. They were like, well, you're an American, we understand. I was like, that hurt kind of. I was like, what?
I think we get that a
what
lot
is happening
overseas.
here? And I look at this and just how they go out of their way to compliment and to show gratitude, and they do this. And I'm not saying that it's always genuine, because again, as human nature, we can always be disingenuous in what we're doing. But it made me reflect. It made me kind of look at myself.
I don't even. But I'm going to push back. Like, there is flattery being
Right.
disingenuous,
Right.
But most of the time, because I spent time in the Philippines as well, and I was there for like, I don't know, 9 months or something like that. Most of the people I encountered there, I don't remember many times it was flattery. It was genuine. I felt as if it was genuine most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that when it's culture, like their culture has embraced this.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And our culture, and when I say our culture, I mean the church, this should be embraced as well, yet it seems to be missing.
Mm-hmm. It was interesting when I was in China, the Christians actually stood out because that was a culture that was not, I mean, in terms of like general interaction on the ground level, was not very gracious and sociable. For example, they would hold the door for somebody, like when you're walking through, you hold the door for them. Like I guess in the Chinese culture, that was just really bizarre. And, showing those kind of interactions, it was with strangers in particular. The Christians tended to stand out that way. And they were like, we're just trying to be nice. And so the whole idea of being the nice person and being gracious, it became part of who they were.
Yep.
And that's how sometimes Christians were identified.
I want to push back on even the word nice, loving.
Loving, right.
Well,
It's not nicety, it's
seen
love.
as nice by the culture, because the culture does not understand the love that comes from Christ, that you would love a stranger.
But the intention behind it should be this love.
You think about when Jesus washed his disciples' feet, and he gives them as a new commandment to love others as he has loved them. And also the idea that by doing this, by acting that sort of way, you're going to stand out and everybody's going to know you're my disciple. That's the major thing. Of all the things, all the doctrines of theology we know, the way we show that we are Christians in an environment, because it was countercultural back then for Jesus, that attitude that we're going to love people, our neighbors as ourselves, or love them the way Jesus loved us. It's by nature it stands out, because our culture is so contrary to that.
But the reason we're even here and talking about this idea of love is the reason we're doing that is because he loved us.
Yep.
So the only reason we can love others, even at the strangers, the only reason we can do that is because of how grateful we are for
Yep.
His grace, His
Exactly.
mercy, and His love.
Mhm.
Without those things, then this
Yeah, you wouldn't.
we are not loving other people.
We
There's
wouldn't
just
be
no way.
motivated. Yeah, the motivation comes from that grace, being that gratitude. Recognize what Christ has already done for us, and then taking what He just from that understanding and also that contemplation. That's how I think about gratitude. Comes from thinking about it and really appreciating. It's like so easy just to say those words, but when you really think about it, I'm like, that person really really made my day. Like that person really just kind of just made me feel like whatever I needed at that time, God has put this person in my life. And like just that spontaneous, just bridging from this thinking, just thinking through this how God operates and through other people, and how the church is actually being fused together by love because of how we love one another.
So something to think about, and why as we talk about these tangibles, because I've often made this connection that, and I think God does this too. We see this in John. So just on the issue of love, he's like, if you're not loving your neighbor, how can you love God?
Yep.
Mhm.
Okay, because our goal, we know we're supposed to love God, but part of what might hang us up in loving God is we're not loving your neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
I think the same thing happens with gratitude, and that's why if we cultivate this gratitude and we have this virtue in our own homes, which I think is one of the key places to start, because I think it's sometimes
sure.
easier with strangers. It's easier when you're out and about with the people you don't normally see. It all of a sudden becomes almost like expected. Like, well, I think my wife and I have this conversation because when she fixes the meal, I've tried to cultivate, and I'm trying again to build the habit, thank you, and just genuinely thank you for what you've done in preparing this
Sure.
meal. And when I first started, she was like, well, I'm just in her mind. She's like, I'm just doing my duty. Like, she's like, I don't want you cooking. From her side, she's like, well, it's not gonna be you. I can't cook. But that doesn't matter. Like, there's still a genuine. She's done this. She spent this time, spent this effort.
For sure.
She might be the only one who knows how to do it, but that's in some ways why I should also be more grateful and not less grateful, because she's the one who made this happen. It's her domain. She knows how. None of us do. And again, it creates this habit of gratitude for her. And so if I can learn how to do this with my wife, if I can learn how to show this gratitude with my children, like even my children, when they do those little things, to have that habit, those tangible, because I got real people in front of me, then I think that's why in some ways it's easier to bring that into our relationship with God, because God you cannot see, God we cannot touch.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why it's sometimes harder to maintain that genuine gratitude, because if I'm not genuine with my wife, I can see her face.
Sure.
And she will communicate to me. And when my children are not genuine, I can see it in them. So as we have this relationship with God, I think this is why our community and why these acts of justice like gratitude are so important, because it's going to help us in our own relationship with the Lord. That if I can be so grateful over my wife who made this meal, then it's in some ways I'm able to recognize the only reason why we're even able to have this meal, and who gave us the money that we made in order to do this, and this is coming from the Lord.
Yep.
And so, because we were just talking about, and we go back to love, we've started talking about the virtue of love in our co-op, and that the whole idea of love is this desire for God, and we do this by caring for and embracing, showing this love to neighbor. And we do this for the sake of God, that there's this unity. And I think we miss that. And I think that's why our gratitude simply becomes, like flippant and like, oh, thanks, appreciate it, because we have to say that.
Yep.
Almost like when we greet each other, it's like, how you doing? And we really don't care.
And nobody ever answers.
Yeah, and if you
honestly.
do
Yeah.
answer, you kind of get
Yeah,
off put.
I'm
You're like, I
fine.
didn't
How
really
are
want
you?
an answer.
I'm fine. We've done our niceties. Now let's
Let's
go.
move on.
I think gratitude can be the same kind of nicety. That
Sure.
thanks, oh, you're welcome, but again, it happens such that nothing is genuine. But I'm saying it doesn't have to be that way. And I think we have to guard our hearts
Yep.
from that drift.
I think
Well-
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
One of the ways, though, is it doesn't have to be like if it's said the same way about the same thing all the time, then it's going to become mundane.
Mhm.
Mhm.
But I think gratitude is recognizing the things that you appreciate. And so I think our wives are really good examples, and husbands. Like,
Yep.
For the wives, husband towards the wife and wife towards the husband, is that when you spend so many years with someone, things become kind of, they're there all the time.
Yeah.
And so you kind of start taking advantage. But if you make it the habit of thanking for the meal, if the wife would make it a habit for, I know it's kind of a joke that if a husband generally doesn't do the dishes and then does the dishes one time and he's like, see what I did, like, even though you do a lot, I don't care which direction it is, when the other person does something
Yep.
out of the ordinary, saying thank you and actually showing that appreciation, or, hey, thank you for going to work today, and thank you. There are so many things that we can appreciate and thank them for, that it will show that appreciation.
I think that's such a good example, though. The whole idea, like, you've done this thing out of the ordinary. It's this good event. And rather so many times than getting appreciation, it's like, well, it'd be nice if you do this regularly. Like what we don't
It's
get.
literally the opposite of that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
like-
you want to
oh.
encourage that. That's what I think. I'm like, if I do this, like, you want to encourage them to continue that behavior. One way to encourage somebody to do a behavior is by being gracious.
Yeah.
And I,
Well,
and I, and
no, I don't want to get on this. I'm gonna move this on. This is absolutely not the direction I was going.
I know
One habit that I have absolutely implemented in my marriage is when I'm around other couples or other women, and I realize how ordinary, like, a trait is that my wife doesn't have.
yeah.
And I go home and I say, thank you so much for not being this type of person.
Mm.
And I go, I'm so glad I married you. And she's gotten used to it by this point. She's like, wow, what happened? Or what did you see? Or,
Yeah.
but there's so many things that I'm appreciative. And it's sometimes I'm appreciative of some of the things she's not and the things she is.
And I find, so I have a newborn baby, and one of the things that my wife and I need to do is, because it's almost like we're both exhausted, and we get into this competitive, like, kind of like petty argument where who's more exhausted or who's doing this or what's going on.
It is a petty argument.
Yeah, it is. It's just, but it happens because we're frustrated, and it's like, I think a lot of, and I've counseled a lot of newer parents, and the same struggle comes up. Their wife, like, I think, feels like their husband doesn't appreciate them, or they don't, there's this kind of lack of connection between the two of them as a baby brings an added stressor into a marriage, and something that wasn't there before. And I think that it tests us and it grows us. I think that's why, part of the, why children are difficult at raising them, because it sanctifies us in some sense. Because if I want my marriage to go smoothly and we work as a team to raise our new son, I need to have gratitude towards my wife, who sacrifices so much.
That's where your competition needs to be.
Yep.
Is who can show the most gratitude
exactly.
to each other.
Yeah, it's
We fall in the same trap. It happens.
exactly.
And I just want to point out that it's not just our spouses.
Mm-hmm.
It is our children. I know
Mm-hmm.
we alluded to that earlier, but our 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 15-year-olds, I don't whatever age, they want to be shown gratitude as well for helping around the house. I think most parents look at it as, well, they better help around the house. I put food in their mouth and clothes on their back and a roof. Nobody wants to be treated that way. And so I
Right.
think this idea of gratitude extends to our children, our spouses, our friends,
Mm-hmm.
our bosses, maybe, our pastors, our congregants, more importantly, our God.
Yeah, I said ultimately our God. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that in some ways, in kind of where we begin, because you mentioned, like, especially if you happen to be the boss and you're the employer and you're paying your employees, I think it does go back in some ways. We don't see it as, well, I'm paying them because this is the contract, but there's some element that even the ministry, when paying the salaries, there's this sense of, I am so grateful for you. Like, this is, I know it's been earned, but I do this whether it's the ministry, I do it with my children. If I've contracted with them for something, like, they're trying to earn something and they're trying to work, we've learned the value of their lives, that this will cost you an hour, this will cost you 5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And when they get done, I'm never grudging. There is that sense of gratitude and that you've earned this, and I'm glad to give this to you because you've enriched me in this process. That is that true habit and very concrete way that in all our lives, all areas of our lives, and this is the challenge, is just, are we doing this? And to become aware of it, and become
Right.
to take an inventory, and it will change how we relate with God in the end.
So
Exactly.
showing gratitude intentionally
Mhm.
is kind of the key to what you're saying.
Mhm.
All right, gentlemen, I appreciate the conversation. You can find us on familiesofvirtue.com, our podcast Virtuous Roots, and all major streaming platforms. Be blessed, and we'll talk to you next time.